Gather round the fire, folks, a lengthy tale I have for thee. Make yourself comfy and feel free to have a cup of tea. This episode of Black Mirror is dark and full of terrors, unlike my videos that are probably full of errors. For the lack of frequent content, I beg for your forgiveness, but here it is, at long last, my analysis of White Christmas. It would be nice to think that technologically this episode is a follow-on from the episode's entire history of you and Be Right Back, because it examines the social aspect of technology very closely, but also seems to have taken technology from both these episodes and advanced it in some way. The other evidence I have to support this claim is that these two episodes are the only ones not referenced in the little Easter eggs that are dotted around the episode. The Z-Eyes are a direct upgrade of the grains seen in entire history, and the technology used to recreate Ash's personality is extracted directly from the brain now instead of using social media. The Z-Eyes certainly are an interesting device and are mainly concerned with Acts 1 and 3 of the story. The device acts as a permanent agent for seeing through another person's eyes, as well as taking pictures, playing music, and blocking people, the latter of which is what the episode predominantly focuses on. There's no evidence to suggest this device works in the same way as the grain does. For example, we don't know if you can recall past memories on it, but as technology does naturally progress, people become less interested in the past and more on the present, and thus streaming live video becomes extremely popular. It's difficult to tell if the Z-Eyes are mandatory for everyone too, purely because there isn't a single person in the story that we know of who doesn't have one. There's also this tendency for technologies to merge and work together so that information is also instantaneous. For example, in the first act we see Matt surveying this floor plan of the pub online, giving exact directions to where the party is being hosted. This could be beneficial in finding out how full a place is before going there, but at the same time I wouldn't want a private event to be posted online for everybody to see. Crashing the party would be relatively easy after all. Matt takes this technology a step further when he uses the live stream to find people's social networking accounts through photographic recognition software. He's even able to get other people to pay him for the pleasure of watching blokes get laid live on a screen from the comfort of their own home. This technological insanity is reaffirming this idea that privacy in a technological age could be eroded to nothing in the future, and there's not an awful lot we can do to stop it. Except for making it illegal, perhaps. In exchange for getting a confession out of Joe, Matt is free to go with an oversized asterisk attached in the small print. That means he is blocked by everybody, and to him everybody is blocked as well. He is deprived of the basic human need to communicate with anybody for helping nervous young gentlemen get laid. Not only that, but the red block to me indicates that he is more than just blocked, but in the eyes of the general public he is on equal standing with murderers, paedophiles, and rapists. If the individuals never knew their bodies had been streamed through a potentially private forum, it isn't made explicitly clear if it was a private forum, but I'm guessing it is. What harm is actually caused by doing this? The problem comes with the distribution part of the equation. If somebody secretly records a one-night stand, the problem arises if the creator begins blackmailing the sexual partner, or if it appears in the public domain, possibly as a response to this. Because the chat's privacy isn't clarified, it's difficult to take a stance on this, but I don't think that Matt should be blocked in this way because his intentions were good, and now he faces a long period of time completely isolated from the world and hated by the general public without really knowing why, because you can't identify the individual when blocked. Interestingly, the police even prosecute Matt for not reporting a murder, even though he cut off the stream before seeing either die, and the only way he would have been able to witness this murder would have been through illegal means. During the first act, there are some very interesting uses of set design and editing that add extra meaning to the story. When Jennifer leaves Harry on his own to go to the toilet, the episode cuts straight to a close-up of Matt sharpening a pair of knives in the kitchen, almost foreshadowing the murderous scene that will take place in her bedroom later. This cut could also indicate that it could potentially have been Matt's fault the two died, and that he feels a form of guilt for what he did. However, he could not have foreseen their deaths coming, and advising a bloke on how to get laid every step of the way has no connection to her being a schizophrenic lunatic. Harry unfortunately does have a tendency to talk to the voices that are literally inside his head, but there was no way he could have seen his death coming either. Ultimately, it isn't really anybody's fault that this happened, it's just down to unfortunate and unforeseen circumstances that led to both their deaths and Matt being prosecuted. One other little detail I find very interesting is the big red neon XXX on the back of the bedroom wall. These crosses symbolize the pornographic nature of this encounter, because at this point it is no longer about the teacher instructing the student and is now a live sex show. The lads who are watching the stream demand they get what they're paying for, even though there's nothing they can physically do to get it, because that would destroy the artifice of this encounter. The red of the crosses transforms all the following shots to be inflicted with a harsh red tint in it, indicating the danger he has gotten himself into. As the red light emanates behind her and the red duvet begins to consume him, the red then stops being a part of the room and begins to spurt out of his mouth. Also interesting is that Matt says he knows how the mind works, which brings me to discussing the second act of the story that introduces the cookies. I would certainly say this is a very apt title for this device because of its connection with internet cookies. As I mentioned in my Be Right Back video, I discussed how social media would one day be used to recreate a personality based on their online activity. These new and improved cookies, however, are able to collect more than just your shopping interests now and can collect everything there is to know about you from just sitting inside your head for a week. This process of collecting information is called shadowing, just like training for a new job. These computers are programmed so specifically that they are able to be tortured by boredom until they become completely subservient, as we see with the digital clone of Greta. At least if you're stranded on a desert island, you would have the scenery to look at and the objective of survival to keep you occupied until rescued. But if you didn't have anything to do, in an empty room for 6 months and 3 weeks, I too would bow down to that American bloke and do what the fuck he wanted, if it meant an end to the boredom. You wouldn't even know what time of day it is either, adding to this disorientation. Plus the computer is programmed to be convinced it's just been pulled right out of its own body, that it's inhabited all its life in order to train it to be a slave to itself, essentially. We, as empathetic and social creatures, find ourselves conflicted, at least I do anyway, about whether I should feel sympathy for this computer or not, because they are given a human representation for the audience to sympathise with. By placing the perspective on the robot, we become attached to it, despite it really being nothing but code. This entire section is the antithesis of Hollywood's teachings that the robots are going to kill us all, because in this instance, we are the ones who are in control of the robots should they become sentient. My curiosity surrounding these new cookies lies within their suitability for the judicial system. Until you rid the world of false accusations, which you probably won't 100% ever be able to do, you won't be able to gain any hard evidence on a crime just by asking a robotic clone of the defendant's mind whether they did it or not. The authorities could easily abuse this too. I mean, as if this guy wasn't manipulated enough with the change of lighting, the snow globe, the bird clock and the location use in order to get a confession, what's to say they won't do it to innocent people too? There's also a very interesting use of editing that adds to the manipulation of Joe's mind when we see Harry going to the toilet. He is seen urinating, and the sound of his piss going down the urinal almost fades into the following shot of the potatoes boiling, like poisoning the well and signifying the deceptively friendly techniques Matt will be using on him in order to get a confession. Using a device like this to get confessions out of people could potentially take away their right to be assumed innocent until guilty, which is concerning because that is the fundamental principle on which our legal system is based on. Or so you'd like to think. We are now slowly creeping into the third act, so let's talk about Joe, where his wife, blocking, and cookies create a living nightmare for him. Unless I'm naive and don't watch enough TV, it's not often you get a show bringing up abortion rights, probably because it's such a touchy subject at the moment. Pregnancy is a very irritatingly typical trope of dramas, and fortunately the show uses pregnancy to address an issue instead of just using it as a plot twist or as a form of narrative resolution. I personally think that if a woman gets raped, she has every right to do what she likes with the child she had forced inside her. But due to women being encouraged that it's their body and it's their choice, Joe finds himself in a rather awkward situation where the control of the child is given entirely to the mother. He is totally convinced that the pair love each other and a baby would be amazing for them, but it is Beth who has the final say on all of it, the relationship, the baby, and what she can do with it. Joe is indeed an awful singer, and with his drinking problems, he's not exactly the most fatherly candidate. But the drinking can be improved upon with help and confronting the problem with words and kindness. Instead of this, she chooses to cheat, lie, and eventually block him out of fear that he might find out about the affair. Perhaps blocking in this fictional setting is the newest and trendiest form of dumping. I mean, people are probably less inclined to do it face to face these days when they could just call them up. A few years later, they could send them a text message. Here, you can just stop communicating with your partner entirely. Play the victim because you don't need any evidence as a basis for your block, and everybody will more than likely believe you. I say this because he doesn't try to contact the authorities about Beth having his child inside her and being blocked by her. Because the child has Joe automatically blocked as well, this assumption of guilt plays into the blocking system too. In this world, it's useless trying to use words to settle differences. You can just block them so you and your children are safe from the bad words and thoughts. But I doubt you'll be safe from them doing irrational and violent things due to them being almost entirely ostracised from their family, blocked or not. It certainly would have been interesting to know if the block on the child would still be in place had Joe been the father. But I guess child custody laws don't exist in this world either, because otherwise Joe would have just gone to the authorities to make sure he saw his child every now and then. As a result of his estrangement from his family, he slowly turns psychotic and cannot believe that after being separated for years from his child, that the truth finally comes hurtling at him like a ton of bricks. He kills Beth's father and leaves her child for dead, and the radio begins to softly play "I Wish It Could Be Christmas Every Day." This song is also played at the beginning of the episode when Joe wakes and looks at himself in the mirror. At this point, one would think it's just typical background noise for the opening, but as the story unfolds, it bears a much darker tone. The song not only mocks Joe for having to relive that moment at the cottage over and over again as a reminder of what he had done, but it goes even deeper than that. Every Christmas, he would drive up to that house just to catch a glimpse of what he assumed was his child, the one day of the year where he knew he would be able to see her, and every other lonely and miserable day he lived was spent wishing it really was Christmas every day. Thanks for watching. Tweet me at HMC_tweets or comment below where we will continue this discussion.